happened fast, but not loud. She had dropped her books again, the same way she always did, right next to the lockers near the gym, where the hallway floor dipped slightly, just enough for things to scatter. And he was there again, shoving past like she was furniture, knocking her shoulder, letting the edge of his backpack swing wider than necessary. The books hit the ground, her glasses tilted. She didn't speak. She just knelt down, quiet, measured, like she'd practiced it. And he laughed, loud this time, said something about how she needed to wear a helmet, or maybe just stop coming to school altogether. Then he kicked one of the notebooks down the hall. Not hard, just enough to make people turn. No one said anything, not the teacher walking by, not the students pretending to look at their phones. And she didn't say anything either. She just stood up, brushed off her sleeves, and looked at him for a second longer than usual. Just a second, then walked away. He called after her, already smiling like he'd won. But someone had seen it. Not a teacher, not a friend. Someone with a clipboard and a camera badge. And in 3 weeks, he'd see that girl again. Not in a hallway, in a cage, under lights, with rules, and no way out. If you've ever watched someone small get pushed around and stayed quiet, hit like, so more quiet stories get heard. And tell me in the comments, what's a moment you think deserves to be a story? Maybe someone overlooked, someone underestimated. I'm listening. Let's tell those stories, the ones nobody clapped for. Her name was Amari, and most people at school never learned it. To them, she was just the quiet girl, the one who always sat near the back, the one who never raised her hand unless directly called on, the one who always wore long sleeves, even when the air conditioning broke. She was not new. She had been at the school since freshman year, but 3 years in, people still acted like she just arrived. Every day, she entered the building 5 minutes before the first bell. Not early enough to draw attention, not late enough to draw questions, just on time. She carried the same plain backpack, no keychains, no patches, no pins. Her notebooks were clean. Her phone case was a solid color, dark gray, with a small scratch near the corner that she never bothered to fix. She moved like someone trying not to take up space, but that was a choice, not a flaw. Amari's locker was near the gym, not by request, just bad luck. The hallway there was louder, the kids rowdier, and it was also where Logan hung out most mornings. Logan was the kind of kid teachers called high energy. He made jokes in class, talked back just enough to seem cool, but not enough to get in trouble. He played lacrosse, though not well, dated a girl from the swim team, though not for long. Always surrounded by a few others who laughed louder when he was around. And Logan had a habit of noticing people just enough to mock them. Amari was his favorite target. It started small. Comments in passing. Careful, nerd alert. Watch your step, wallflower. Do those glasses come with a library card? She never responded. Then came the accidental bumps, the blocking of her locker, the sudden loud shout behind her just to make her jump. Once, he slapped a book from her hands in the cafeteria. No one said anything. She picked it up and kept walking. At home, Amari lived with her aunt and uncle. Her parents were overseas, deployment rotations, Navy officers, both. She had not seen them in person for over a year. She never complained, because they had taught her early how to stay composed when the world tried to tell her who she was. Her aunt worked nights. Her uncle managed a gas station. They were kind but busy. They thought Amari was quiet because she was shy. They did not know she trained 3 nights a week in a facility 25 minutes away, using a borrowed membership under a local youth MMA program. The gym was old. The mat was worn. But the people there saw her, really saw her. There, she was not the quiet girl. There, she was lightning, focused, precise, balanced. She had won 4 amateur matches in the last year, all clean, all by submission, never a gloat, never a roar, just a hand raised and a bowed head. At school, no one knew. She kept it that way on purpose, because Amari was not interested in proving herself. She was interested in finishing what she started. In high school, that was something she just wanted to get through. In biology class, She sat near the window, took notes in cursive, always had 2 extra pens, one black, one blue, because she liked the way certain thoughts looked in different colors. She finished assignments early, turned them in quietly, and never looked for recognition. Her teachers often wrote, "Excellent work, but would love to hear more from you." She never replied to that, because she knew that sometimes silence was the answer to a question people did not know how to ask. Lunchtime was the hardest, not because she was lonely, because it was where people stopped pretending. Everyone performed, some with volume, some with cruelty. Logan sat 3 tables over. His laugh always reached her before the words did. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with that smirk, the one that said, "I know you won't do anything." And he was right. She would not. Not here. Not yet. Her only friend, if you could call her that, was Miss Bell, the library assistant. Miss Bell never asked why Amari came in every lunch period. Never asked why she checked out the same martial arts history book 5 times. She just smiled and stamped it. Once she said, "You move like someone who knows the value of stillness." Amari had looked at her, surprised, then nodded. It was the highest compliment she had received that year. That week, Logan pushed harder. He tripped her in the hallway, mocked her hoodie, posted a picture of her bent over her locker with the caption, "New mascot, broken turtle." The post got 8 likes. No one defended her. One girl even commented, "She kinda does look like one though." Amari saw it, read it, closed the app, went to practice. Her coach, a woman named Ray, noticed something different. Amari's jabs were sharper, her transitions cleaner. Ray asked, "You alright?" Amari nodded, said, "Just ready." Ray smiled, said, "Then let's work on your footwork. You're scheduled next month." Big crowd. Amari said nothing, but her hands flexed with anticipation. That night, Logan bragged to his friends that he was entering a youth grappling match, just for fun, a mixed demo tournament. His uncle had signed him up to get him focused. He laughed, said, "Watch me take down some TikTok nerds." His friends laughed too. Someone asked, "What if you get choked out?" Logan said, "Please, I've seen YouTube. I'll be fine." Amari knew he had entered, not because he told her, but because her coach handed her the bracket. She saw the name, Logan K, and smiled just a little. Ray asked, "You know him?" Amari said, "He goes to my school." Ray raised an eyebrow, said, "Want me to shift you to another bracket?" Amari looked up, calm, said, "No." 3 weeks passed. Logan never trained, never studied the rules, just showed up on match day with a borrowed GI and a smile. He bounced on his heels like he was warming up, took selfies, laughed. Amari sat in the far corner, hood up, earbuds in, eyes closed, breathing steady, balanced. Her name was called. She stood, walked slow, hands light. Logan looked up, froze. She stepped onto the mat and finally looked him in the eyes. He blinked, confused, then smirked, said, "Really?" Amari said nothing. The bell rang, and the match began. The referee looked from one fighter to the other. Amari was already in position, hands relaxed, knees light. Logan rolled his neck like someone imitating a boxer from television. He flashed a smile at his friends in the stands, gave a thumbs up. They cheered, not loudly, but enough to make him smirk. Amari said nothing, just breathe. The referee gave the signal. Begin. Logan came forward fast, too fast. His stance was wide, his arms flared, no guard. Amari stepped once to the side. He missed, by a full shoulder length. He turned, more annoyed than alarmed. Came again, this time with both arms out, trying to grab her. Amari pivoted, caught his wrist, guided it, let his momentum do the work. And suddenly, Logan was off balance, not falling, but off center. He stumbled, caught himself, then lunged again. No technique, just frustration. Amari stepped forward, not away, and that was when he felt it. The shift, the floor no longer under him, the mat rushing up. He hit the ground harder than he expected. It was not a slam, it was a placement. deliberate, clean, controlled, and humiliating, because it came from someone he still thought could not possibly be this strong. He scrambled to stand, face red, ears ringing. The crowd had gone quiet, not shocked, just watching, carefully. Amari did not move. She waited, stance ready, balanced. Logan wiped his mouth, glanced at his friends. None of them laughed now. One held a phone, halfway raised, then lowered it slowly. He charged again, a noise in his throat, anger, desperation. He managed to grab her this time, locked both arms around her waist. For a second he smiled, as if that was all he needed. He started to lift, and then, nothing. She dropped her weight, bent her knees, rotated, and now he was off balance again. Worse this time, his grip slipped, and she moved behind him, fast, too fast. Suddenly her arm was under his chin, not choking, just warning. The referee leaned in, asked if she had it. Amari said nothing, just adjusted, and Logan froze. He felt the pressure, not pain, not yet, but it was there, the end, waiting. He tapped, twice, fast. The referee blew the whistle. Match over. Amari released, stood, took 2 steps back, faced the referee. Logan stayed on the mat, breathing hard, looking up at the lights like they had betrayed him. The crowd clapped politely, not for the drama, for the discipline, because they had seen a clean fight, a respectful finish, and a lesson. Logan stood slowly, avoided eye contact. He did not speak, did not shake her hand, just left the mat, shoulders tight, face blank. As he walked past his friends, none of them said anything. One offered a bottle of water. He ignored it, walked out the back, never looked back. Amari sat down in the cool-down area, unwrapped her wrists. Her coach approached, smiled, said, "You didn't even break a sweat." Amari said, "He hit harder in the hallway." Ray laughed, then nodded, and that was it. Nothing more needed to be said. The next Monday, school was different. Amari walked in like she always had. 5 minutes before the bell. Same backpack, same gray hoodie, same glasses, but something was missing. The glances, the smirks, the background laughter. Gone. Logan was not at his locker. His friends were quieter. 2 avoided her gaze. One nodded slightly. Not an apology, just awareness. She walked past them, did not slow down, did not speak. In class, the teacher asked a question. No one answered. Then, for the first time, Amari raised her hand. The teacher blinked, then smiled. Amari gave the correct answer. 3 students turned to look at her. No one laughed. One nodded. She nodded back. And that was it. At lunch, she sat in the library, as usual. But this time, Miss Bell brought her a new book. Said, "Thought you might be ready for something more advanced." Amari accepted it, opened to the first page, and smiled, because she was. Outside, the world kept moving. Students yelled, phones buzzed, lockers slammed. But inside Amari's space, everything was calm, because she had never wanted to be noticed, only respected. And now she was. He avoided eye contact for a full week. Logan moved through school like someone walking over glass he couldn't see. Nothing about his schedule changed. Same classes, same seat, same hallway near the gym. But the air was different now. The same people who used to laugh with him had quieted. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Because Logan now carried something that could not be dropped or shaken off. The memory of being completely, publicly, and silently undone. It wasn't that he lost. People lost fights all the time. It was who he lost to, and how. No screaming, no dramatic moment, just clean, technical exposure. In front of a crowd that wasn't even cheering, just watching. And now, every time he walked into a room and someone paused their sentence, he wondered, did they know? Had they seen it? Or worse, had they seen her? He looked at her twice that week. Once in English class, once during lunch. She didn't look back. Not once. She just read her book, took notes, walked past him like he didn't exist. That was what made it worse. Because for years, he had seen her as beneath him. Now she didn't see him at all. People whispered, not loud, but enough. One student said, "Did you hear she's some kind of champion?" Another, "My cousin trains at the same gym. Says she's like, scary good." Another, "Wait, is that the same girl he used to mess with?" The same girl? That question sat heavier than any punch Logan had ever thrown, because it meant people remembered. Not the jokes, not the laughs, the disrespect. And now they were rewatching it in their minds, with new eyes. A teacher called on her in class. She answered calmly, clearly, with a tone that was firm, not loud. When she finished, the teacher nodded and smiled. Several students turned to look at her. This time, they weren't trying to mock her. They were trying to see what they had missed, and what they saw was not new. It had always been there. They just hadn't paid attention. In gym class, Logan kept to himself. He no longer barked instructions, no longer shoved shoulders. He changed in silence, ran laps alone. When he tried to joke with one of his old friends, the reply was flat. "Yeah, cool." Then nothing. They weren't afraid of him. They just didn't follow anymore. The current had shifted, and Logan had not learned how to swim without it. One day, walking past the library, he paused. He didn't go in. He just looked through the window. Amari was sitting by the far wall. Same seat, same posture, a different book, one of the thick ones. He thought of walking in, of saying something. What, he didn't know. But his legs didn't move, because he knew she owed him nothing. Not a look, not a nod, not even a word. He stepped back, walked away. That night, Logan lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought of every time he had knocked her books down, every time he had rolled his eyes at her silence, every time he had made her the punchline because she was too quiet to speak up. Now he understood. She wasn't quiet because she was afraid. She was quiet because she didn't need the room. He remembered something his older brother once said. The ones you overlook usually aren't smaller. You're just standing too high to see their full shape. Now he saw it, fully, painfully, and it would not leave him. Amari noticed the shift, too. Not in his behavior, that didn't matter, but in the hallway space. People no longer moved through her. They moved around her, not out of fear, out of recognition. A kind of silent acknowledgement that she belonged exactly where she was. She never asked for it. She never wanted it. But now that it was here, she accepted it with the same quiet discipline she brought to every match. Ms. Bell in the library said one afternoon, "Funny how the air changes when truth shows up." Amari didn't answer. She just smiled faintly, because she had learned long ago that you do not need to announce presence. You only need to hold it. One afternoon, a substitute teacher mispronounced her name. Before anyone could laugh, 3 students corrected him at once. Not mockingly, just respectfully. That had never happened before, and Amari felt it. Not pride, just alignment. The world was no longer off balance. She passed Logan in the hallway 2 days later. He looked up, briefly. She looked straight ahead. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She kept walking, didn't slow down, didn't speed up, but her steps made more noise than his words ever did. A week later, flyers went up for the next youth MMA showcase. Her name was listed near the top. In bold, people noticed. Some pointed, some whispered. She didn't react, because she didn't need them to know. She only needed to show up. Logan tore one of the flyers down, not out of spite, out of memory. He took it home, stared at it, then folded it once, then again, then tucked it in the bottom drawer of his desk. Not as a reminder of loss, but as a record that he once stood across from someone he never bothered to know, and she showed him exactly who she was, without ever raising her voice. Her name was Kayla. No one paid her much attention, not in the way they did with Logan, but she had always orbited close enough to feel the warmth of his attention. She had laughed when he laughed, nudged his arm when he pointed at someone, smiled when he mocked, not because she thought it was right, because it was easier, safer. He was popular, she was not, and standing near him meant you never had to worry about being the one getting mocked. Until that day, she had been in the stands when Logan walked out onto the mat. She had come to support a cousin competing in a different bracket, but she saw him, And then she saw her, and she remembered. The glasses, the hoodie, the quiet girl who always picked her books up without making a sound. The same girl Logan had pushed, and she had laughed. Once, maybe twice. Not loudly, but enough. When Amari stepped onto the mat, Kayla felt a small knot form in her stomach. It tightened with every second. When Logan missed his first grab, Kayla blinked. When he fell the first time, her jaw tensed. When he tapped out, she didn't move. The match ended. The crowd clapped, and Kayla sat still. Not embarrassed for Logan, but exposed. Because she had helped build the silence around Amari, not by attacking her, but by doing nothing. And now, that silence had turned. At school, Kayla avoided eye contact. Not with Logan, with Amari. Because something about her now made Kayla feel small. Not threatened, just revealed. She had never said anything cruel, never posted a meme, but she had smiled at them. That was enough. In third period, she watched Amari answer a question with quiet confidence. She saw the way other students looked at her now, not out of curiosity, but respect. Kayla kept her head down, did not join the whisper, did not ask for details, but something shifted in her, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying, and once she noticed it, she could not carry it the same way again. The next time Logan made a joke in the hallway, not Amari, just in general, Kayla did not laugh. He turned, looked at her. She gave a small, awkward shrug, then walked away. She didn't mean it as a stand. She just didn't have the stomach for it anymore. At lunch, her friend Carly mentioned the match. Said, "I heard she choked him out." Kayla said, "It wasn't like that." Carly raised an eyebrow. "You watched?" Kayla nodded. She didn't even touch him hard, just moved around him. Carly said, "Still, kind of badass." Kayla didn't answer, because badass wasn't the word she would have used. It wasn't revenge. It was stillness, like someone simply refusing to carry what wasn't theirs. A few days later, Amari dropped a pen in the hallway. It rolled near Kayla's foot. Kayla picked it up, held it out. Amari took it. Not at once. No smile. No word. Just a shared, quiet transaction. It stayed with Kayla all day. She replayed it in her head. Not because it was special, because it meant she had been seen and not dismissed. In the locker room, one of the other girls made a snide comment about Amari's hoodie. Said, "She got that thing glued to her body or what?" Kayla turned, looked at her, said, "Leave it." The girl raised an eyebrow, said, "Just saying." Kayla repeated, "Leave it." The room went quiet. Then the moment passed. Nothing else was said, but the silence afterward was different. Not heavy, just real. Later, Kayla sat outside the school, waiting for a ride. She saw Amari walking down the sidewalk alone, backpack slung over one shoulder. Same quiet gait, same straight posture. Kayla watched her go. No one called out. No one threw anything. No one interrupted her path. And for the first time, Kayla realized maybe this had always been who Amari was. Not invisible, just unshakable. And everyone else had simply mistaken her silence for weakness. Kayla thought about saying something, an apology, an explanation, but she didn't. Not because she was afraid, because she understood. Amari didn't need her guilt. She just needed her absence. Absence of mockery, absence of noise, absence of the little smiles that kept people small. So Kayla gave her that, and it was enough. She started noticing things she used to ignore. How many students cut through the library without ever looking around? How few people said thank you to the janitor who cleaned the back stairwell? How the lunch staff always handed trays to the same few kids with a smile and barely glanced at the others? She didn't become an activist. She didn't start a club. She just stopped letting herself laugh at the wrong parts. And that changed everything. Not loudly, but clearly. One afternoon, Kayla saw Logan standing near the vending machines, alone. He looked up, nodded. She nodded back. Neither of them smiled. She walked past, and he didn't follow. They both knew that season had ended. In homeroom, the teacher asked students to list someone they admired. Kayla didn't write Amari's name. She didn't want it to look performative, but she wrote, "Someone who moves like they don't owe the room anything. The teacher read it out loud, then paused, said, "That's beautiful." Kayla didn't look around, didn't need credit. She had finally learned what presence meant. Amari never mentioned Kayla, never looked for her, but she noticed the absence of laughter, the quiet protection, the way silence, when it no longer participated in the harm, became a kind of shield. She didn't trust it yet, but she acknowledged it. That was enough. The hallway near the gym felt different now. Still loud, still chaotic, but less cruel. And that had started with someone like Kayla choosing to close her mouth instead of open it. Because not everyone needs to be a savior. Sometimes it's enough to stop being part of the shadow and let the light find its own shape. Logan had not planned to disappear, but it started slowly, and by the time he noticed, he had already been replaced. It was the Monday after the match. He walked into school like he always had, earbuds in, shoulders loose, head up, but something had shifted. People still filled the halls, doors still slammed, teachers still called out instructions over the morning noise. But where there used to be nods, grins, high fives, there was now pause. Not rejection, not ridicule, just absence. No one said it out loud, but Logan knew. The shape of his presence had changed. Where he once absorbed attention with ease, now it slid past him, looking for something else to cling to. At lunch, he sat at his usual table. The table was not empty, but it felt thinner. Carly didn't look up when he sat down. Jameer scrolled for his phone. Leo said, "What's up?" but it landed flat. He tried to joke about the vending machine stealing his dollar. Got a couple chuckles, but they weren't the same. Not from the chest. Not the kind of laughter that binds. More like filler. He looked across the cafeteria. Amari sat 2 tables over. Alone. Head down. Notebook open. Pencil moving. She wasn't looking at him. She never did. But somehow, she pulled focus without trying. And that made it worse. Someone walked past and gave her a nod. Someone else offered her a pack of extra markers. Small things. Nothing performative. But Logan felt it like a rope slipping through his hands. Not all at once. Just gone. In gym class, the coach paired him with a quiet sophomore named Victor. Not his usual crew. Logan didn't complain, but he noticed. Coach didn't yell his name as much anymore. Didn't call on him to demonstrate drills. Didn't even make eye contact. He asked Victor if he wanted to shoot hoops after school. Victor said, "Nah, I got plans." And that was it. In class, when Logan raised his hand, the teacher acknowledged him politely, but moved on quickly. When he made a comment during discussion, it landed with a dull thud. He looked around. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody smirked. They just didn't follow. During a group project in history, the other students picked partners before he could even stand. He ended up working with a kid who barely spoke English. They finished the assignment, but not the way Logan was used to. Him leading, others laughing. There was no stage anymore, just work. He tried to bring up the match once, casually, to Leo. Said, "Crazy how fast those things go, huh?" Leo looked confused, then said, "Yeah, I guess," and went back to his sandwich. That was it. No recognition, no invitation to talk more. Logan didn't bring it up again. That night, he searched the match online, found a clip on a local gym's Instagram page. Only 15 seconds, no tags, just the final moment, the tap out, the referee stepping in, Amari standing. The caption said, "Clean finish. Respect." There were no comments, but had been viewed over 2,000 times. He stared at it for a long time, then closed the app. The next morning, he passed a teacher in the hall. The teacher nodded. Not warm, not cold, just clinical. Logan realized he had once been the kind of student teachers smiled at automatically. Now they looked just past him, not out of malice, just adjustment, as if their expectations had quietly been rewritten. In our class, the project was to paint someone who had surprised you. One girl painted a figure in a hoodie, face unreadable, but the posture unmistakable, a fighter's pose. Logan did not ask who it was. He did not have to. He began skipping lunch, not to protest, just because the cafeteria had started to echo. He sat in the library instead. Once or twice, he saw Amari there. She never looked up. She didn't move. But he did. Every time. Quietly. Before he could be seen. One afternoon, walking home, a younger student passed him and muttered, "She choked you out in like a minute." Logan kept walking. Didn't respond. Didn't flinch. But his hands curled slightly in his pockets. He started walking different routes. Avoiding the gym. Avoiding the spots he used to claim. The weight room. The back stairs. Even his own locker. He used to think of school like a stage. Now it was a hallway he was trying to get through without making noise. At home, his parents noticed, asked if he was okay. He said, "Just tired." They believed him. He wanted them to, because he didn't know how to explain that he was not hurt, not bullied, not wronged, just dropped by a system that no longer needed him to be the center. He looked at old pictures on his phone, group shots, crowds, people laughing, clapping him on the back. He scrolled and scrolled, then stopped. There was a picture someone else had taken, one he hadn't saved. A screenshot from the match. Him on the mat. Amari standing, not gloating, not even looking at him. Just still, composed, like it was never about him. Only the discipline, the control, the clarity. He deleted the picture, but it stayed in his mind. Amari, meanwhile, never spoke of it. She moved the same, sat the same, trained the same. If anything had changed, it was in the way the world around her responded. A teacher asked her to lead a study group. A student asked to borrow her notes. Someone asked her what gym she trained at. She answered politely, then went back to work. She never spoke Logan's name, not even to her coach, because his name did not matter. What mattered was her space, finally visible, not loud, just hers, and no one walked through it anymore. Logan, in his own way, started to understand. That power wasn't taken from him. It was never really his. It was just passed to him by a system that favored noise, posture, and size. And now, that system had blinked and found someone else more worthy of its attention. He didn't try to get it back. Not because he didn't want to, because he knew he couldn't. That part of his story had ended. Not with punishment, just pause, and no invitation to return. It happened on Wednesday. The hallway was loud as always. Backpacks slamming into lockers, sneakers squeaking across tile, voices bouncing off the ceiling like stray tennis balls. Amari moved through it quietly, same pace, same steps. But this time, when she reached the glass double doors that led to the courtyard, something shifted. A teacher was holding one door open, but the other, the one most students avoided, remained closed. Usually, Amari would wait, would step aside, would let the group behind her go first, just to avoid being jostled or pushed. But today, she pushed the door open herself, walked through, did not hold it, did not apologize, just moved forward. It was small, but the girl behind her noticed. So did the boy beside her. Amari had never failed to hold the door before. She had always paused, always yielded, and now she didn't. They didn't say anything, but they felt it. A subtle reordering, not rebellion, just balance. Later that day, in history class, a debate formed. Something about protest versus respect. Voices rose. Logan, sitting 2 rows back, tried to add something. He spoke quickly, trying to sound casual, but the teacher called on Amari instead. She answered clearly, with detail, referenced a source no one else had read. No one interrupted her. When she finished, the teacher smiled and said, "Exactly." Logan did not speak again. Not for the rest of class. After school, the hallway near the gym was its usual chaos. Students throwing crumpled paper, laughing, showing each other memes. Amari's locker sat near the middle, right between 2 loud clusters. She had always timed her visits carefully, arriving before the bell or after the crowd. But today, she walked straight into the noise, unlocked her locker, swapped her books, closed it gently, turned, walked through the middle of the chaos like she belonged there, because she did, and no one blocked her path. One boy made eye contact. He had once laughed when Logan made fun of her glasses. Now he looked down, not out of guilt, out of recognition. recognition, a kind of belated respect, like someone finally realizing they had been looking through a fogged-up window. At practice that night, her coach asked how school was. Amari said, "Quieter." Ray nodded, said, "Because you stopped moving around it." Amari didn't answer, but her stance shifted slightly. Weight more centered, less defensive, more grounded. Ray noticed, smiled, let it go. The next morning, someone bumped into Amari in the hallway. Not hard, just a shoulder brush, the kind that used to send her books spilling. But this time, she didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. She kept walking, didn't even turn her head. And the boy who bumped her paused, looked back, as if unsure what had just happened. She never looked back. In the cafeteria, her seat changed, not by choice. Someone else sat where she used to, so she picked a new table, slightly more central, still not surrounded, but not hidden. She ate slowly. Read. One student sat nearby, not close, just near, enough to acknowledge the space she held, and enough to tell others this table is not empty. Later, the art teacher asked if anyone wanted to submit to the school zine. Amari raised her hand. Everyone turned. She said, "I have a short essay." The teacher nodded, said, "Bring it in." No one laughed. No one whispered, because the room now moved differently when she spoke. Not in fear, in focus. Logan noticed. He noticed everything. He saw the way people turned when Amari entered, the way silence followed her, not out of awkwardness, but reverence. She wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but she had weight now, not borrowed, not gifted, claimed, and he couldn't match it, because his weight had been noise, hers was presence. He tried once to say hi, passing in the hallway, voice low. "Hey." Amari looked at him, just for a second, not cold, not cruel, just aware. Then she looked away, kept walking, and he stood still for a beat too long. That week, Amari made another small decision. She signed up to tutor underclassmen in science. No announcement, no group text, just a quiet name on a clipboard. But 2 days later, 3 students showed up to her first session, all quiet, all curious. And when she spoke, they listened, because by now they understood. She was not just smart, she was steady, and that was rarer. A teacher asked if she wanted to join the student advisory board. Amari paused, then said, "Only if I don't have to speak for everyone." The teacher smiled, said, "Sometimes just being in the room is enough." She agreed. Meanwhile, Logan faded, not into isolation, but into the background. People still nodded, still exchanged greetings, but he was no longer the first chosen, no longer the one people turned to in the middle of the circle. The spotlight had moved, and he had not followed. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was just consequence of weight shifting, of stillness finding a center. And Logan wasn't angry, just quiet, because he finally understood. He had never been mocked, only held up by others who thought noise was power. And now that they had learned otherwise, they had dropped him gently and walked away. Amari stood near the back of an assembly that Friday, watching the stage. No announcements were about her, no awards, no applause, but she was there, standing, visible, and people knew it. Someone near her whispered, "That's the girl, right?" The other said, "Yeah, but don't say it like that." "Say it how?" "Say it with respect." Amari heard it, didn't react, but her breath steadied, a little deeper, a little slower, because she wasn't waiting anymore. She was present, and that was the difference. It started in small, invisible ways. Students who once ignored Amari now made room for her in group projects. Teachers who once wrote participation needed on her reports now added leads quietly, but effectively. People who used to walk through her, in hallways, in conversation, began to step around, not in fear, in recognition. In biology, her lab partner changed. It used to be whoever was left over. Now students asked in advance, because she didn't waste time. She didn't correct with sarcasm. She just got it done, quietly, cleanly, and in school, that carried weight. The library table she had always claimed, the one near the corner window, was was suddenly full. Not loud, just populated. Two other girls sat nearby, uninvited, but not intruding. They brought their own books. Didn't ask her to talk, but nodded when she looked up. That was it. The entire exchange. And still, something had shifted. Amari wasn't alone anymore. And not because she reached out, because people had shifted toward her. Miss Bell noticed. She said, "Funny, isn't it? How quiet people tend to build gravity." Amari looked up, raised an eyebrow. Miss Bell added, "Things move around them, slowly, inevitably, like planets." Amari smiled, then went back to her reading. Meanwhile, Logan noticed the change too. It was impossible not to. People who once laughed at his jokes now smiled politely and moved on. He still sat at the same table during lunch, but it was never full. He once spoke, and entire tables would pause to listen. Now conversation rolled on without him. He passed Amari in the hallway and no longer looked at her. Not because he was afraid, because he felt the silence around her and knew it was not for him. It was her space, earned, held, and not his to enter. One day in gym class, the coach asked who wanted to lead warm-ups. Logan's hand twitched, started to rise, but the coach looked elsewhere, called a different name. Someone quieter, someone who had never spoken in front of the group before. They did fine, not perfect, but the class followed, because Logan was no longer the automatic center. Carly, who used to laugh the loudest when Logan mocked people, began to drift too. She sat further down the table now, made less noise, listened more. One day, she asked Amari if she could borrow notes from chemistry. Amari handed them over without a word. Carly said, "Thanks," like she meant it, and Amari gave the smallest nod in return. Nothing more, but that was more than Carly had ever earned before. The school counselor, reviewing peer nominations for student leadership roles, saw Amari's name appear 3 times. Once for academics, once for character, once simply written as. She keeps everything calm. The counselor had never spoken to her at length. Now she scheduled a meeting. Amari entered the office, sat straight, spoke clearly, left without asking for anything. And the counselor, for the first time, rewrote her file, not quiet, but anchored. Because that was what she had become, the weight that steadied the room. In art class, a student painted Amari again, different this time. No hoodie, no mat, just a figure made of lines, balanced, strong, surrounded by white space. The teacher asked, "Who is this?" The student said, "The girl who walks like sound is optional." Teachers began to notice more than just her grades. In group work, Amari never demanded attention, but everyone deferred to her, naturally, as if their voices found rhythm near hers. One teacher, new to the school, asked, "Was she always like this?" Another replied, "Yes, we just weren't looking." Even Logan's parents noticed. He came home quieter now, didn't mention school, didn't complain. They asked how things were going. He said, "Fine," but it was not the same fine as before. It was not defensive. It was not dismissive. It was hollow, a word with no walls, because he no longer had a place to lean. He opened social media less, avoided clips of the match, avoided pictures of students with medals, certificates, awards, especially when Amari's name appeared, which it did, not often, but always without fanfare, which made it hit harder. She joined the student advisory board, said little, but when she did speak, people leaned forward, because she didn't talk to fill air. She talked to shape it. One of Logan's old friends, Leo, tried to joke with Amari once. It was not cruel, not pointed, just a nervous attempt. She looked at him, waited. He stopped mid-sentence, said, "Sorry." Amari said, "You do not need to apologize," then walked away. Leo stood there, unsure whether he felt relieved or gutted, because she had not rejected him. She had released him. The yearbook staff requested a photo of Amari for the academic highlights page. She almost declined, but then she thought of her younger self, the one who had stayed silent through everything, and she said yes. The photo was simple, natural light, no smile, but the eyes were steady, and that was enough. A substitute teacher, once asked if Logan and Amari knew each other. Logan said, "Not really," which was not true, but it was not false either, because now, the girl he thought he knew was far beyond his reach. She had outgrown the frame he built for her, and she had not looked back. Logan stopped sitting at the front of the bus, stopped shouting across rooms, stopped waiting for people to laugh first, and slowly, the echo around him faded, not out of punishment, but because everyone had turned towards something steadier, and he was no longer it. Amari, on the other hand, did not rise. She settled into visibility, into place, into power that required no declaration. People did not follow her. They simply made space when she moved, because that was what happens when gravity builds over time. Not everyone liked it. A few whispered about her, called her cold, detached, distant, but they did it from far away, because even those who didn't respect it fully had learned. You do not interrupt stillness that holds weight. You adjust, or you are left behind. It was not immediate, but it was everywhere. The change, that is. It did not sweep through the school like a wave. It moved like fog, soft, low, but steady. And the people who once stood in the center found that center had shifted. It started with whispers, not behind backs, but into notebooks. Students who used to draw hearts and drama in the margins now scribbled Amari's name underlined once, circled once, not with obsession, with curiosity, like they were trying to trace gravity on paper. In class, group dynamics began to tilt. Students who used to dominate discussions now found themselves talking to empty space. The teacher would nod, but eyes would drift to someone else, and often, that someone was not speaking. They were simply holding space, quietly, like Amari. Not everyone could replicate her stillness. Some tried and stumbled. Stillness without substance becomes awkwardness. But some, a few, learned to breathe differently in her presence. Not copy, adapt. The hallway near the gym, once chaotic, now grew quieter when Amari passed through. Not silent, just more aligned. People lowered their voices, not out of fear, out of respect. And that respect did not come from any speech she gave. She never gave one. It came from observation, from consistency, from people finally understanding that presence is built over time, and she had built hers brick by brick, without asking for permission. Logan watched all of this unfold. He did not fight it, but he could not ignore it, because everywhere he looked, people were looking somewhere else. Conversations that used to rise when he entered now barely acknowledged his presence, not in cruelty, just in movement. One afternoon, he passed by the student council bulletin board. There was a new flyer. Peer mentorship applications open. Amari's name was at the bottom, as an example of a successful tutor. Someone had added a sticker next to her name, a small one, of a crown. Not bold, not flashy, just placed, like someone quietly acknowledged what had been earned. Logan had once had that sticker, figuratively, the invisible crown. People listened when he talked, even when he said nothing of value. Now, people listened to silence, because hers was full, and his was hollow. During a science presentation, a student stumbled over their words. Logan chuckled softly, not loudly, just enough to be heard. The room went still, not sharply, just still. Someone turned, looked at him, not with anger, with disbelief, like he had just broken something fragile. The teacher said nothing, but the silence that followed said everything. Logan did not laugh again that day. Kayla, who had once stood beside Logan in laughter, now sat beside Amari in literature. They did not talk, but they shared space. And when Kayla once dropped her pen, Amari picked it up, handed it over, and Kayla said, "Thanks," softly, and it echoed louder than any cheer. Carly, who used to echo Logan's mockery, now stayed quiet in group settings. She was not being punished, just not called on. She raised her hand in history class. The teacher nodded, then called on someone else. She raised it again. This time she was picked, but only after a pause. That pause carried weight, because once, her voice had arrived first. Now it arrived last, and it hit differently. At lunch, the noise at Logan's table was thinner, not absent, but distant. Stories used to bounce. Now they landed and died. He tried to tell one about his weekend. No one asked to follow up. He tried again. This time someone checked their phone. He stopped mid-sentence. Nobody noticed. Meanwhile, Amari's tutoring sessions grew. 3 became 5, then 6. Some came to learn, others just to sit, to be near the kind of focus they had never practiced. She did not entertain them. She simply did her work, and they watched. Some took notes. Some copied her posture. One even bought the same brand of notebook. A teacher brought her up in a staff meeting. Said, "There's a shift happening. I think she's at the center." Another replied, "She's not even on the announcements." The first one said, "Exactly. There was a rumor she had been offered early college credit. No one confirmed it, but it circulated. Not as jealousy, as possibility." People began to see what could happen when you stop asking the room for approval and start building your own table. Logan passed the gym one afternoon. The door was open. Inside, Amari was training with Ray. Pads thudding, breath tight, form perfect. She moved with quiet violence, not aggression, precision. He stood at the door for a second, watched, then stepped away before anyone saw him. He did not hate her. He did not resent her. But he could not hold himself up anymore, because all the scaffolding had shifted, and he had not built anything underneath. Even teachers began asking Amari for feedback. Would you consider leading a workshop? Would you be open to mentoring someone next semester? Would you join the curriculum advisory panel? Each time, she answered calmly, "Yes, if there's time, I will consider it." Her answers held weight, because she did not rush to say yes. She knew she could now, but she chose carefully. That was power. The ripple did not look like fireworks. It looked like a rebalancing, of attention, of permission, of presence. Amari had not taken anything from anyone, but her gravity had pulled the room into new alignment, and those who could not adjust, they were not blamed, just left behind. At the next assembly, Logan sat near the back. No one looked for him. No one called his name. But when Amari was announced as a nominee for peer leadership, there was a pause in the room, then applause. Not thunderous, but deep, consistent, respectful. Logan clapped too, not out of obligation, but out of something quieter. Maybe understanding, maybe apology, maybe both. After the assembly, Logan walked out into the light, felt the air shift, not against him, just around him, like the current had moved on, and he was standing in the quiet it left behind. He took a breath, longer than usual, then let go. The school moved into spring. Test dates posted. Locker doors faded from blue to gray from sun. Seniors started counting weeks. Teachers started counting days. The building creaked the way it always did when the end drew close. But this year, something in the hallways felt different. Still familiar, still noisy in places, but underneath all that, quieter, more precise. Like the volume of the building had been turned down just a little, but the clarity turned up. You could feel it in the way students walked, and who they followed, and who they paused for. And most days, they paused for Amari. Not in crowds, not in awe, just quietly, like how people slow down when approaching a structure that has always been there. And now, for the first time, they see it. She did not change how she dressed. Still wore hoodies. Still wore her same old shoes. Still carried her backpack over one shoulder, despite the fact that the other strap was fully intact. But people made space for her. Not exaggerated, not fearful, just respectful. Like she was a piece of the hallway they could no longer step through. Teachers mentioned her more, not in class, but to each other, at meetings, in break rooms. There's something about her. She's never loud, but she never wavers. She carries something that keeps the room upright. Once, a younger student asked to walk with her to class. She said yes. They walked in silence most of the way, but before they reached the door, the student asked, "Were you always like this?" Amari paused, then said, "I was always here. You just started looking." That night, she wrote it down. "I was always here. You just started looking." Then she folded the paper in half and and placed it in the back of her notebook. She never shared it, but she kept it, because some things only need to be said once. Logan sat 3 rows behind her in English class now. He still showed up on time, still did his work, still responded when called, but there was no longer any spark in his sentences, no gravity in his jokes, no tilt in the room when he entered. And he knew that a story in this place had found its closing paragraph, not because anyone kicked him out, but because the page had turned, and someone else's chapter was already halfway through. They crossed paths again, outside this time, near the back exit, where the gym emptied into the blacktop. Amari was waiting for a ride. Logan was heading to the parking lot. He slowed when he saw her, not out of indecision, out of instinct. He stopped a few feet away, said, "Hey." She turned her head, nodded once, then looked forward again. No smile, no anger, just stillness. He said, "I was a real piece of..." She interrupted gently. "You don't have to finish that." Logan looked down, said, "I know I do not deserve to say anything." Amari said, "Then maybe just stand here." For a second, he did, and they stood in silence. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but alignment, the kind that says, "I no longer need to carry what I did, but I will never forget that I did it." When his ride came, he nodded once, then walked away. She stayed. The last day of school came. There was no ceremony for her, no banner, no shout out over the intercom. But at the end of the day, as students filed out, someone had drawn a chalk circle near the library steps. Inside the circle, for words, "You changed the temperature." No one claimed it, no one erased it. But when the rain came 2 days later, Amari watched it wash away from her seat inside. And for a second, she almost smiled. At graduation, her name was called. She walked the stage like she walked everything else, calm, even quiet. Some people clapped, some people nodded. One person stood, not for show, but because they had once sat beside her in silence and knew what it meant to rise for someone who never asked you to. Logan did not graduate top of class, but he walked the stage, and when he stepped down, he looked at her once in the crowd. She did not wave, but she looked back and held it, just long enough, then turned. That was more than he thought he deserved, and just enough to carry. After summer, they would not speak again. Their lives would move into separate directions, one into systems, one into rebuilding. But this story, this stretch of hallway, of lockers, of silence, would live with both of them. One as the proof that you can stand without shouting, and the other as the reminder that power, once borrowed, will always be reclaimed. Back at the school, a new student found herself, surrounded at lunch. She dropped her tray. Someone laughed, but before the sound could stretch across the room, a girl at the next table stood up, picked up the tray, placed it back, said nothing, but her stance carried weight, because she had once sat near someone who showed her how to hold space, and now she knew how to do the same. Amari never became famous, never went viral, never trended, but in that school, in that year, she became a pivot, a quiet one, a recalibration, and that was enough. Sometimes, all it takes is for one person to stop stepping aside, to choose just once, to move through the middle, to answer the question clearly when the room waits for you to stay small. And after that, the world cannot pretend not to see you, even if you never speak again.